Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining. I'm in the virtual California theater with Nicholas Woods, who is the director of what I'm going to call a revenge thriller. He may change his mind or change my mind, called Echoes of Violence, which makes its premiere when we're recording this. It's Saturday, March 20th. It'll be running from March 20th to March 30th. And then at Cinequest, you can go creatix.com, Cinejoid, and hopefully it will have a big life beyond it, because this is a great film. So Nicholas, thanks for joining me today. As we were just saying, we would normally be just hanging out in the back of the Continental in San Jose, and I'd be drinking a soda water, and you I don't know, whatever. You've got coffee now, right? And feel free. Yeah. So
I got coffee now, but who knows later. Yeah.
So yeah, I like I said, I started by calling this a revenge thriller, but I really do think that it subverts it to a large extent. There was almost no point in which I really could predict where it was going to go, and there were a few moments, but a lot of it was, you felt different. So what was the germ of the idea, and we'll start there. What was the germ of the idea for Echoes of Violence?
Well, really, we wanted to make a revenge drama that is going to be told in sort of 5 parts. That was the absolute beginning of the idea. And then where we started going with it, I have a friend who's going through an immigration process, and, she had let me know that, she was beginning the process, and I was like, how's it going? And she said, it's going okay, but I haven't heard from my immigration lawyer in like almost a month, and I gave him all the money I have. So a little worried about that. And so I got a little bit worried for her and decided to do a little research of my own, trying to see, do immigration lawyers ever screw their clients over? You think, oh, they're, lawyers in a noble field of immigration, they should be good people. No, just like everything there, there's some bad seeds lurking. And some really bad stories, some really horrible stories of people taking advantage of immigrants, which to me is the lowest of the low. So, we decided to, luckily for my friend, her immigration process went really well. But I started going down this sort of fiction fantasy route of, what if her story didn't go that way? What if it went sort of towards these other directions? And then that's sort of where the rest of the story sort of filled out. And the rest, just came in through the writing process, really.
Was there anything that you wanted to hold yourself back from? Like I said, because I do think there's a subversion, and I think there's an exploration that the average Amazon Prime bullets and violence kind of B movie, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
it is deeper, it is more thought provoking, and were there ever moments where you're like, no, this is too much like the way everybody would expect it to go?
Yeah, absolutely. Our real focus was to, you really want to, I try to keep most of the things that I'm interested in are character-driven stories. So we try to keep it, again, what is really happening with these characters. And although some of them might seem, in interesting professions, you can still have somebody who's got sort of a far-fetched profession, like, let's say, a hitman, still try to find the human being in there and what are they really trying to do, and try to relate, the things that they want and the things that they need to real situations that we're going to actually kind of get to in life. Because if it's too far-fetched, then it's not interesting, it's not relatable. So we really just tried to keep ourselves focused on the human beings in the story, and, not get too caught up with, feeling like, oh, we need to do this. No one's going to watch our movie if we're not doing, enough blood or enough, enough action or whatever. We didn't worry about that. We just wanted to keep telling our story from our characters' perspectives and hoped that would be enough.
Yeah, and you have made these very complicated leads. There's kind of a trio with an antagonist off, but one antagonist isn't. But so it's hard there. So let's do that through that. You start with what the idea that certainly is prevalent in American conversation: the good guy with the gun in Sedona, which is your realtor, and
Yep.
Heston, and
Our Arizonian realtor.
yeah, where I guess you have to have that, but it's and you'd almost think he's going to be the action hero, and becomes really kind of the hapless sidekick. But I don't think he's like comic relief. It's just
right. He is our anchor for, as we sort of start delving into this kind of bigger crime world, and that the main character Mareka sort of is bringing us into. Alex, the person who finds her bloody in the desert, not knowing what to do with her, and kind of gets roped into her whole revenge plot. He's our anchor to not forget, the normal person's perspective, what a regular regular human person like you or me, who isn't necessarily dealing with these crazy, scenarios every day, how we might be taking, being here. And so he was very important to the story, and I think just really helps keep us grounded that, for sure, none of this is necessarily every day, but fuck, it might be happening out there. So, you know what I mean? And as, I've learned, there's a lot that is happening out there. And so, we do keep ourselves pretty sheltered. And so he is our sort of guide to something a little bit more dangerous and extraneous. And he helps us, keep anchored to real life through that.
And again, there's a kind of a challenge of what people would make an assumption. This is about human trafficking to some extent. To a large extent. So I hope I'm not, that's no spoiler.
No,
but
I don't think
from
it
the
is.
moment the Mareka says, I'm illegal, and you realize, wait, she's white, she's blonde, and
right.
Then later revealed, to be South African. This is not in any way the way someone making an assumption when you're having this in a real world debate. It's not someone that that's not the picture that comes to mind with human trafficking.
Absolutely. And just, there's just immigrants from every walk of life. I don't try to necessarily, just because, she is a Caucasian female. South African immigrants have just as much trouble as any immigrant. So it's just, following this sort of tale, we tried to really, we wanted to dive deep into the struggle of an immigrant coming to this country, both the financial burden that the country places on them, as well as the inability to make a living. So they become very susceptible to being taken advantage of by a multitude of people. But, the last person you think would take advantage of you and harm you is, your lawyer. You know what I mean? Obviously, there's that cliche of like, all lawyers, some lawyers are shady or whatever, but they're here they got into their profession to uphold the law. And so you do, at that grander state, at that sort of, at that sex offense, that sex trafficking crime level, which is just, there's just almost very few things that are worse. I don't think there is much worse. So yeah, you really, it's hard to imagine somebody stooping to those lows, and they do in this life. And so we do want to shine a little bit of a light on that as well, but really a lot of the focus is the struggle of an immigrant in America and how hard it is for them.
Yeah, and you've got a side with, with Kellen, who is introduced one way, and then there's a flashback. I don't want to give away too much, but like, what's motivating him was not anywhere near again where I expected. And you could be talking about veterans issues as well. Again, not the focus of the film, but you've opened up an interesting side conversation. So, what drove you with that? Again, basically creating what seems to be an antagonist who is, we understand somewhat.
Yeah, he's an interesting character, because as we meet him, it seems like the main antagonist of the film, and as the story goes on, you learn there's many other antagonists. It's going to take the viewer a minute to figure out who the true antagonist of this film is. And that was what was exciting to write, and I hope is exciting to watch for the audience. But yeah, Kellen's interesting because, you know, he's, working with the actor who played him, Chase Cargill, who I think did a really, really great job. It's not easy to play somebody who is, we didn't want him to be this cliche, heartless guy who just, you know, can just kill anyone, doesn't care, you know, from the army, you know, was a Marine, like, oh, like that just like excuses every sort of like, you know, he can just kill whoever, doesn't matter. Like, no, that's not believable, and that doesn't seem very truthful to the human experience. So, you know, it is challenging because we were finding these little bit of gray areas where he does, you know, he is okay with extreme violence, but he does have a heart somewhere in there. So it was really cool to build because it was, it's not your normal character, and finding those moments where we are trying to trick the audience a little bit into how they perceive this character. And so we do lean into that. And we had him, you know, throughout the film, again, it's told in multiple parts. So in one part, you're seeing a moment of time that later we're going to revisit that same moment in time. And the actor will be saying these same dialogues, the same moment in time, but we did play around with having him say these lines a little bit differently, having different emotional objectives, so that we lean into the perspective instead of keeping the perspective sort of blank. We leaned into it to kind of, lead the audience down what their natural perspective was probably going to be. And that was a lot of fun. And I think people will really definitely enjoy trying to figure out Kellen for sure.
Yeah, you've got an interesting structure. I hadn't even really gotten to that. You know, you've got the chapter titles, and for those watching, you know, it's not as portentous as Zack Snyder's Justice League chapter titles. So, you know, it's interesting that you did that. But I also
I pray not.
I also wrote, you know, that it was like a Tarantino film. I had that structural feeling of watching Reservoir Dogs or Pulp Fiction to some extent, but again, to me, a much deeper delve into what's really going on. And so, why did you choose that rather than just tell it as a straightforward narrative?
It's so funny. You know, we really didn't have. I mean, I love Tarantino films. I think he's just super unique and I always try to read his screenplays because he's obviously an amazing screenwriter. But we had no sort of inspiration or homage there. You know, we were drawing off of a lot of different type of movies. I mean, in terms of a modern contemporary filmmaker that we were inspired by a lot would be somebody like Taylor Sheridan with something like Wind River. Which, you know, we absolutely love. I think it's just such a fantastic modern crime drama. But I love stories that are told in multiple parts, or even just multiple segments. It doesn't have to necessarily be chapter titles, but even, you know, going back to one of my favorite movies, The Shining, you know, has got that sort of multiple part structure. City of God's got a really nice multiple part structure. A lot of Westerns that I love. I'm sure that's where Tarantino gets it too, you know. But like How the West Was Won is told in a really cool 5-part structure, obviously with a couple different directors. But yeah, I mean, it's hard to say exactly, you know, what is so interesting about this. What I feel is interesting for me about a multiple part story is obviously the timeline and being able to, you know, go back and forth. And that's just a classic, you know, writing structure that, you know, has been around forever. And what's cool about that, and what's cool for the audience, is probably obvious for the audience. You get to learn things, you know, you get to learn about characters in different ways by, you know, coming back to, first you get a presentation of a certain point in time, and then in a different part, you get to jump back, and all of a sudden you're getting a broader strokes of the story. And that's so much like human life. I mean, we get to know somebody, you know, when you first meet them, you meet a human being, like say at a bar, you know, you don't get there. You get, hey, how's it going? Here's what's going on with my life now. You don't get, all right, well, when I was born, here's what happened, and here's what happened when I was 2 and 5. That's never how a human being introduction to your life goes. And so I don't know about you, but if you ever get to know somebody, and this still happens. I was speaking with one of my best friends the other day and just learned this insane story about him. This guy's been one of my best friends for like 6 years. And he told me he got so sick from the flu that he was paralyzed for a year when he was a kid. And I was like, how did I never know this about you? And already, there we go. Now, what a painting stroke of somebody who I thought I already knew so well. Now here's this other layer that I've learned so much later. And that's what's cool about this. You know, you get to give somebody a perspective and play with an audience's perception. You think you know somebody, and then we can go back and give you a new detail of their life, and your perception was face value. You didn't get that whole idea, and now we're giving you a little bit more and a little bit more, and it's very cool.
We see a little piece, you know, in some characters, definitely. I mean, because it ties to the title. You know, the echoes of violence. Are we just, you know, you just tell the story about a friend paralyzed for a year, and what did that do to his personality? And I think about that with Kellen in particular. But you know, so I mean, there it is. You know, these things echo through. And you have this really casual attitude. No, you don't. I mean, the film has this judgment on us, and I think you alluded to it earlier. You've got, you know, some really interesting issues raised, some serious issues raised, you know, human trafficking, obviously, I think to some extent, immigration reform, because if the system allows human trafficking, but the judgment that I thought was interesting, and you're in LA, I'm in LA, and a lot of this film takes place in LA, and it's like, oh no, you know, it almost felt like everybody knows it's happening, and nobody wants to do anything. Did I take a wrong?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, there's just so much that we are knowledgeable about to an extent that we just overlook because we'll go shop there because it's cheaper, but we don't think about where those products came from, or we don't think how those things were made, or how our food was grown or cultivated, or how these animals are treated. There is a multitude of things that we turn a blind eye to. I am, you know, for sure guilty of this, and am trying to constantly. That's what's nice about diving into any story and writing. That's what's just great about this process that we all love about filmmaking. You get to learn about a lot of different subjects in life, and hopefully that reflects upon yourself and kind of where maybe you're going wrong on a grand scale, or even just a simple scale between, you know, you and the people who are around you. But yeah, I mean, keep it simply, there's a lot that I believe, you know, that at least the government, you know, in our state and city and higher up is aware of, that, you know, we just, maybe they're trying to figure things out and they can't, or that it's just, you know, not important to them enough. And, you know, that's up to the citizens and who we elect in our state to make sure that those issues are felt to be important. Absolutely.
Yeah. Let me lighten it a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. You know,
let us end there. Completely let everybody walk away.
Let's just end there. Enjoy the film. Thank you so much for watching.
No, because, you know, again, great film, but your casting choices are interesting. All your leads are really good, but you have a couple of really well-known and recognizable character actors supporting. One that I don't think I put in the review because I didn't want to spoil it, but IMDb does. You know, very interesting. But the leads are pretty much unknown. Did you have any investor pressure, like somebody's got to be a marquee name in one of these three roles?
No, I had no pressure. That's what's cool about this film, especially compared to my other film, my first film. We made this film even cheaper. Usually you're kind of trying to progress in budgets, and we're like, no, we're going to do this one even smaller. It's going to give us even more control and make things even more difficult on ourselves. But no, I had no pressure on this film. Thankful to the people who did invest in this and all the producers on all ends, because no, zero pressure on any of that. I put pressure on myself for certain things. I mean, I know what is going to help sell a movie, you know what I mean, and what's going to get it out there. I wanted to work with these three actors for a long time. Now, you know, what it takes to, I love also working with unknowns. I love watching movies with unknowns. You know what I mean? I mean, it just is so, there's so many movies, speaking of, you know, big movies, like you just mentioned, Justice League. There's so many times where I'm like, I want to see an unknown in these roles. Like the movie star is distracting me greatly. So to answer your question simply, no, there was no pressure there. Obviously, you know, to get certain people on board, you got to have big budgets. Like say you want to get, you know, big actor, you know, number 5, it's going to cost, you know, millions of dollars, because that's what, you know, these guys are used to.
Right.
So that's just already out of the question. And that's okay, because I'm excited to work with these three actors. I'd seen them all in things between my first movie and now. I had seen them and they had been on my radar, and I knew that when this project's coming up and I need people who are going to, you know, be up for filming in sort of strenuous circumstances that we had, you know, that's going to kind of go outside of like, you know, typical filmmaking. And like, you know, we're going to be up at the crack of dawn. We're going to shoot for 6 hours, and then we're going to take a break for about 5 hours in the middle of the day. And then we're going to go back. Like, that's not really how the, you know, the rules are and how you're supposed to do it. You know, it's very tough. It's demanding. So I needed like close people who were down for that, especially in the Sedona segments, because the sunlight in Arizona is so harsh in the middle of the day. You just can't film outside. Your images will look really terrible. But because there's like, you know, 15 hours of daylight, even more, you're forced to, really take advantage of that early light and that end of the daylight. And that can exhaust you and your cast and your crew quickly. So you need people who, depending on your project and depending on your budget and scale and how much time you have. So we have a small budget, which means we have limited time, which means we got to get it done when we're there. So that means the team's got to come together and everyone's got to trust each other and, kind of put sleep on the back burner, which everyone did, and it was really cool. And then, there was, I saw Chase Cargill and Sam Anderson in a play together in Los Angeles at the Road Theater Company. And then in there, I was like, I want to see them playing father and son. They weren't father and son in the play, but I'm like, they have such a connection. I want to see them playing father and son in something. I want to write that. So immediately I wrote that role, not even knowing if Sam Anderson was going to be down, if you would be interested, let alone, available, all that stuff. So I did write that, and then luckily, he was interested, and that's one of my favorite parts of the film, as I think they just have such a great chemistry. And then, I had this other role just sort of hanging there for a long time, and Frank Oz was my number one choice, because I think it's okay, because it's on IMDb and other people have said it. I don't think it's necessarily a surprise. Hopefully it'll be a cool surprise to see him in there, because he has never played a villain before on screen, or on certain.
Creepy. And
yes,
I think one of the things that you with both of the father and son there, that dyad is how banal. I can't remember which. Was it Elie Wiesel who said that about it's the banality of evil. Like, they're just so calm and even middle class about it. Frank Oz's kitchen was like, oh, he's not living fancy. It's not opulent.
Yes, you nailed it 100%. You nailed it better than, and I hope people get your the perspective that you've gotten when it comes to this specifically. And that was one of my biggest goals here, is just finding the subtlety of evil. It's not always in your face, man with a twirling mustache and like in the shadows. You know what I mean? It's like, it's there. You can meet, a guy at the bagel store and say, hey, how you doing, sir? Open the door for him. And like that guy could be like some, you have no idea about who people really are. And people can, I'm sure, has put on their nicest face when they're going day to day. So we really wanted to dive into this, this casual, soft sort of side of evil and these people who are, very obviously definition evil, but
Yeah.
I mean, just definition, but they don't necessarily come across how you maybe assume they would. And in fact, they come off very human, and hopefully that makes it a little bit more frightening.
It does. And like I said, it is a great film. And so, I do wish success with this. I want to, see
Thank you,
people
man.
see it. As every film, I keep saying this about Cinequest, is I'm just disappointed that I'm not actually in the California theater or the Hammer theater seeing this on the screen with people and then talking about it afterwards. So because it's worth a conversation. So thank you, Nicholas, for taking the time today, and
Thank you.
Can hardly wait to see what's next.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you having me on, and I appreciate your words. You've nailed it. So thank you.
Drop your gun and step away from her.
They're gonna go to your house and then they're gonna go to your families. It's what they do.
I'm scared of Anthony, Marika. And you should be too.
Thanks for watching. Hit the subscribe button to make sure you don't miss out on any Fanboy Planet videos. And remember, use your powers for good.